risk. So that is clearly one of the areas that we asked the High Court to take a look at. The second area that we asked the High Court to opine on was the issue of jurisdiction. Usually in the situation when a penalty is imposed, especially in terms of compensating somebody, then there must be a finding of fault or a finding of what is the damage, there is what is called the adjudicatory process. There must be an adjudicatory process before the penalty can be imposed. And so one of the points that we've raised for the court to consider is whether TRAI, under the TRAI Act, has the ability to have that adjudicatory responsibility from which comes the ability to impose a penalty. Please remember that in the construct, TRAI has every right to establish quality of service in various parameters, of which COAI is one of the quality of service. So they have every right to do that, and they have every right to penalize or to set penalties for operators when the quality of service is clearly not being met. So if you recall the regulation that was issued by TRAI, there were two parts to the regulation. One was the increase in the penalties for failure to meet quality of service standards. So that went from 50 lakhs to double, right, 50,000 to 1 lakh, and then from 1 lakh to 1.5 lakhs for continuous violations, right? So that increase, and we are not contesting that. We're saying that's well within the jurisdiction of TRAI to impose. What we are asking the court to adjudicate on is the ability to impose a penalty for compensating the consumer. And so that is the phase that we are looking at. And the third area we are highlighted is that much of the issues pertaining to call drops is beyond the control of the operator. There are some things which are within the control of the operators, excuse me, and there are several things which are outside of the control of the operators, and we'll be highlighting what some of those are. So that's the context of the litigation that is going on. Three principal areas that we've asked the court to take a look at. The court in its wisdom will decide hopefully on the 22nd what that is. With that, let me just go through the presentation. I'll try and go through it very quickly. Please raise your hand if you have any questions during the presentation. Otherwise, after the presentation, I'll be happy to take questions. So the first thing is the overall statistics that you have. Of course, you know, we have 120 million in all of Maharashtra, right? 79 million mobile subscribers today, tele density of 88.6, which is one of the highest outside of the metro areas of Mumbai and Delhi. And by the way, hard copy of this is in your pack, so it's available for you. You have it. It's one of the highest in India, and also the ARPU in out of Maharashtra is on the higher side than one would expect to see in other states. So again, not only we have a higher tele-density, we have a total of 8 operators because Maharashtra is such a vibrant state. There are 8 operators and there are 3 networks, 2G, 3G and 4G, all operating. Yes, Ani?
Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
This is not so I'll get it.
It is there. We'll have to hand it
out. For those of you who need soft copy, we'll make sure that soft copy versions are also available to you. But again, the point I'd also like to make is that if you look globally, we are now the second largest mobile country in the world. And as a result, we have certain unique challenges to us, which I'll again highlight. But again, one of the things that's rather unique is that in most countries, you will never see 3 networks and 3 technologies going on simultaneously. Usually what happens is that you go from 2G to 3G and the 2G networks kind of go away, and then you have 4G coming in and 3G kind of goes away and you have 4G. We have all 3 networks going on at the same time. And this was one of the issues with regard to call drops. The handoff parameters, as we started rolling 3G and 4G in, the handoff between a 4G customer and a 3G customer and a 3G customer and a 4G customer and a 3G customer and a 2G customer was pretty different and unique in India, right? Previously, as I said, a 4G customer usually got handed off through a 3G customer, or a 3G customer got handed off to a 2G customer. That was usually it. We have a dynamic where three technologies are requiring handoffs between one another, and this is a learning experience for us, and this obviously has happened in the last 6 months as we've moved into 3G and 4G rollout networks, all right? So this is one of the areas contributing to the call drop problem, which we are obviously addressing. But next thing that you'll notice is that, no, go back, I'm sorry. We have 10 million broadband subscribers, and most of these are in the urban areas. We don't see very high densities in non-rural areas, urban areas, and the total number of cell sites is 91,850. This is throughout the state of Maharashtra. Of the 91,850, we probably have about 20,000 in Pune, close to about 18 to 20,000 cell sites in Pune itself. All right, so this is the next page. In Maharashtra, again, as I said, 297 sites in Pune, and in Maharashtra in the last month, just in the last 11 months, we've put up 8,474 sites. All right, the total infrastructure investment that has been made is 1,675 crores between most of the major operators. Now, this is just to highlight the fact that we are making investments, not that we are not making investments. There are certain bottlenecks that we run into, but clearly the investments are being made because Maharashtra is clearly one of the areas where we've paid higher prices for our spectrum as well. So clearly we want to make sure that the investments follow suit.
A large chunk of this would be because of the 4G rollout, right?
3G, 3G, 4G, again remember that most of the new cell towers that are coming are for 3G and 4G, because obviously the voice sort of penetration is kind of plateauing off, and the demand that is coming is in the 3G and 4G. Again, one of the things that we'd like to highlight is that operators don't put up cell towers unless there's demand for the service, right? Costs us anywhere from 10 to 15 lakhs to put up a single tower. So clearly, if we want our payback, we have to make sure that the demand is there. So when there is no demand, it's very, very unlikely that a cell tower is going to start coming up. Yes?
What's the percentage between 3G and 4G users in Maharashtra?
So most of the folks who are in Maharashtra, if you look at the broadband, the greater majority of them, a good 60 to 70% will be in 3G as opposed to 4G. Yeah. Okay, before I get to this, also remember the other reason that we talked about in terms of call drop situation, and this is just a drive test I'll get to, just go back to the other one so that, one of the points that I want to highlight in terms of the call drop situation, excuse me, is, as I said, not only do we have the 2G, 3G handoff parameters that are going on, but Maharashtra was one of the states where the licenses had to be renewed, and therefore whose spectrum had to be quote-unquote refarmed. All right, so you'll notice that in March last year, December last year, March, Maharashtra's all of the operators that were having 900, 1800 megahertz spectrum had to rebid for that spectrum. And so there was a change in the spectrum holdings. Now, just a bit of technical background, although there was change in the quantum of spectrum, so that means people who owned 900 may have had 6 megahertz of 900, may have only got back 5 megahertz, and then they got, in the bidding process, 1800. So there was a change between the 900 and 1800, and some folks who never had 900 were able to get some 900. And so there was this change, and because the spectrum had been aggregated to what they call contiguous spectrum, because when you're rolling out data networks, 4G, 3G, you have to have 5 megahertz of contiguous spectrum. In a voice network, contiguous spectrum is not a concern. So in the last 20 years, when spectrum was given to the various operators in the 900 band, for example, they would have got 901, 905, 908, 912. And that's fine, it doesn't make a difference. Now, when you go to 3G and 4G, if you don't have 900, 901, 902, 903, 904, 905, you cannot offer 3G and 4G service. So, what does this mean? So when we go in after the auction process, just about all operators were given different frequency spots. So that even your existing cell towers had to be retuned for the new spot frequencies. This is not a trivial exercise. All right, the TRAI said that when this was done in places like Australia and other countries, it took them a good 1.5 to 2 years. And the TRAI in its recommendations had indicated that operators should be given enough time to go through the retuning of their whole network. You can see 91,885 sites to retune to new is not a trivial exercise, and certainly to try and do it in 45 days was the days that was given to operators.
So is that happening or it is not happening at all?
It's finished. It's finished, but it took us. As I was saying, this was part of what also caused the drop call problem. Because if our radios and cell towers haven't been completely tuned, then obviously if you try to make a call on that frequency, the network was not going to be able to recognize and you have a drop call. So this was part of the problem as to why there was an intense period when both voice and data calls were facing drop calls, because our networks were going through. This is what has traditionally been referred to as optimization. So what we do is that you go through your whole network and re-optimize, set right your spot frequencies, make sure that all the adjoining cell towers know how to talk to one another. It's a fairly complex technology exercise. Also remember that if I had 900 and I had to move to 1800, I have to have more towers now to get the same coverage as I had in 900. All right, so it was taking me time to replace 900 towers with 1800 towers. So this was the additional pressure that was on the operators, especially in a highly developed city like Pune and a highly industrialized area like Maharashtra, where we had this many towers, to go through that whole process, and that's what we are calling optimization. The good news is that most of that is done and completed, so the optimization process is done. The continuous challenge that we face is in the area of getting new cell towers, because remember that when you go to 3G and 4G networks, because you're going higher on the spectrum, you need approximately 30% more cell towers than if you were using 900. All right, the higher end of the spectrum, more cell towers. And the final area that comes into play is spectrum. All right. Less spectrum, more towers, more spectrum, less towers. That's just the physics of it, right? And let me just give you a benchmark in terms of India experience versus international experience. The average operator in India has anywhere from 12 to 15 megahertz on average per operator for all of the services. In advanced countries, right, where mobility is advanced, they get at least 45 to 50 megahertz of spectrum. So you're talking about 12 to 15 versus 45 to 50 megahertz of spectrum. So there's a big gap. And also, we have another anomaly in India. In the rest of the world, you have at least 5 networks, right? You have a cable network, which is a two-way communications, right? You have a landline network, all right, usually very heavily penetrated with fiber. All right, you have a satellite network, which is a two-way communications, because it would have started off as TV and would have gone to two-way. Then, of course, you would have the mobility network, and then you have private networks. Usually, most governments have their own networks, which are secure and have their own standards and everything. So, at least 5 networks globally on which the data traffic is spread. In India, we only have 1 network. So, think about the challenges we face in India. Not only we have 1 network, all of this demand is going to come on this 1 network, and we have one of the smallest amounts of spectrum anywhere in the world. So these are some of the things that we are working through, and so part of what is contributing in some sense. Now, as I said, we're working on overcoming it. The good news is that a lot of this is overcome, so we'll go through. So let's just go to the next item. Now, what the quality of service benchmark in Maharashtra. How does the TRAI kind of come through? What they do is, if you look at the green, they get into a car. This is how a test drive is done. A car has multiple antennas on its roof, and those multiple antennas are fed into a computer which has a specialized software loaded into it. This software is constantly making calls on all of the spectrum bands that are used by the various operators. And as they drive on all of the roads highlighted in green, they are seeing, one, the signal strength, what is the amount of signal strength that they're receiving from the towers nearby. Two, what is the call quality? How clear is the call? Is there any interference in spectrum interference causing poor quality? And are there drop calls? And then of course they also check to see is there coverage. So if you look at the area that is covered by the drive test by the TRAI, when the TRAI came back and said, look, there are challenges in the call drops. These are the areas that were highlighted as areas that had significant call drops. Please keep in mind that the quality of service is an average, and it is an international benchmark which says in a geography, which is invariably the state or a metro, depending on where your licensed is, in that geography, the average must be 2%. The drop calls cannot be more than 2%. So if you take the total number of calls happening in a month, no more than 2% of those total calls should have been dropped. That's the simple quality of service. And so TRAI tests it by driving and finding out. And when they did this, these are the areas where they found that you're having more than the acceptable average of 2% in these areas. Now, let's go to the next one.
So what is being done about this?
So these are the highlighted areas. Let me come back in terms of saying what can be done. So the other problem, obviously, that you folks know well, is as a result of electromagnetic frequency fears, all right, many of our towers have been either removed from existing buildings and housing colonies, or we're not getting additional sites to be built, and these are the areas that you can see are the hotspot areas. Now, it's interesting that many of the hotspot areas also coincide with the poor coverage areas, right? So again, the Honorable Prime Minister of Communications made the same point. We're saying is that if you want to solve the call drop problem, clearly the ability to get cell tower sites is going to be critical. So you ask us, what are we doing? So we'll go to the next couple of slides. All right, this is the. I'm sorry?
Question regarding the cell towers.
Yes, please.
We do hear a lot from both the civic bodies about unauthorized or illegal cell towers. So, I mean, how does the telecom authorities work without taking the necessary permission, and how difficult or how easy to get the permissions? Because whenever we face problems on our own, when you call up, they say that the tower has been taken down because of this and because of that, and both the civic
And
bodies.
how does it concern the
Consumer,
subscriber
yeah.
that your tower is up or down? I mean, it doesn't matter, right? You have promised a certain service, you have to deliver it.
The SLA is not met.
That you, the agreement is that you provide ABC, and I'm paying you for ABC.
So those are very valid points, but let me try and sort of respond to it. When a cell tower comes up when we decide we need a cell tower in a particular location, right, you have to go through a dual process. The first part of the application process is with the central government. That means you've got to show them that the spectrum that you're using does not interfere with anybody else. We have to submit clearances to 13 government agencies: police, Coast Guard, Navy, Air Force, Army, the police, the local police, Doordarshan, DRDO, Space. All of these anybody who has spectrum has to say the spectrum that we are going to use in that particular area does not interfere. That itself takes us 6 months. Then the DOT itself has various license requirements that we have to comply with, right, in terms of the strength of the EMF and everything else. Once that's done, Then we have to come to the local authority. In the instance of Pune municipality, and we said, look, we'd like to get our tar in this particular building, and you go through a process, and they say, well, here's the list of requirements from us in terms of, fire, access, roads, safety margins, stability on the buildings, engineering studies, all of this has to happen. So when we submit this, a couple of things happen. Either one, the municipality comes down and says that we now want a lot more in terms of the fee, the application fee, right? This is obviously happening in lots of jurisdictions. It's in the courts in many multiple jurisdictions, right? The DOT has given a set of guidelines which the central government has given to the state government and said, please try and comply with this so that you don't have multiple things going on. Unfortunately, in the state of Maharashtra, that has not been completely aligned. The DOT guidelines on cell tower locations and implementation has not been completely aligned with the state government, and because the state government hasn't given the full guidelines, the local municipalities, each of them excuse me, each of them has their own. So when I come to Pune, when I come to Nashik, when I come to Ahmednagar, when I go to Nagpur, every one of them has a separate set of requirements, different fees, different payments, and everything else. So clearly that is